Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Town Talk. I'm City Manager Scott Neal. This year, we planned a series of town talks around important topics included in the City of Edina's 2020-2021 budget work plan. The city has 4 primary budget goals: strong foundation, reliable service, livable city, and better together. Tonight's presentation is about the city's fire operations. Fire Chief Andrew Slama will talk about his department, calls for services, and need for new stations in our community. Andrew will speak for about 30 minutes. After his presentation, he will take questions. I'll facilitate that question and answer process. We will end tonight's town talk with when there are no more questions, or 8 p.m., whichever comes first. However, you can continue to ask questions and make comments online at the bettertogetheredina.org for the next week. The online conversation closes on Tuesday, October 5th. Now I would like to formally introduce Andrew, who has been our fire chief since July. Andrew has been a member of the Minnesota Fire Service since 2004, working as a paramedic firefighter in Edina, Savage, Mankato, and the Midwauketon Reservation in Prior Lake. He has ascended through the ranks over the course of his career, serving as captain, deputy chief, fire marshal, and chief in Savage. He is Edina's 8th fire chief. And I'd like to introduce you to Chief Andrew Slama. Chief.
Thank you, Scott. Please hold the applause. We're going to just, for the purpose of the conversation today, we are going to take our masks off when we're talking, and we'll put them back on if we're going to come back out and make contact with anyone in the crowd. So, thank you, Scott. Thank you to the residents for having us. We're excited to be here tonight to talk about our fire department operations, the history behind it, and what our next steps for preparing for the future are. I have Assistant Chief and Operations Chief Pete Fisher with this evening, and we're going to bounce back and forth as we go through this, go through our presentation and provide some information to the residents here in person and also online. So without any further ado, I'll pass this over to Chief Fisher to introduce himself.
Thank you. Again, my name is Pete Fisher. I've been with the fire department for a little over 20 years, which is just a fraction of the time of what I want to talk about, which is the history of our fire department. When the village of Edina was incorporated in 1888, there wasn't a fire department. For years, for decades, almost half a century, the residents relied on fire companies from Minneapolis. And in 1941, some residents got together and made plans to form a volunteer fire department. So if you remember the old school bus garage at Eden and Brookside, that originally was the old Public Works building, and that was the original fire station. So the city council approved a pumper truck, a 15 horsepower rotating siren for the roof, and that was the beginning of our fire department. In 1953, the fire department moved into the new city hall when it was built on or very near this site. On the west end was the fire station. And in 1955, Edina, in addition to its volunteer firefighters, began hiring career firefighters. In 1960, Edina received a donated ambulance, and that was Edina's first ambulance in the beginning of our emergency medical services. And back in those days, 2 calls a day was considered a busy day. In 1971, the fire department moved to its current location, a brand new station at 6250 Tracy Avenue. And in 1975, 3 of the fire department emergency medical technicians were certified as paramedics, and that began our advanced life support ambulance service. The city and the fire department continued to grow through the 80s and the 90s. And in the 90s, when the busy days started to be 10 calls per day instead of 2 calls per day, the city recognized a need for a second fire station. Fire Station 2 was built on York Avenue, and it was intended to be just a paramedic substation. So during the day, there'd be an additional ambulance housed out of that station, and they'd run calls in that area, which was starting to become a busy area for our city. It became clear pretty early on that just having daytime response out of that station wasn't enough, so it was converted to house 2 paramedics 24 hours a day. So they built in dorm rooms and did some more infrastructure within the station to support that. In 2008, the Tracy Avenue Fire Station was replaced by a new fire station that was big enough to house all of our equipment, our growing shift, and just provide more long-term health benefits for our firefighters. So better sleeping accommodations, better locker room accommodations and that sort of thing. In the last decade, the fire department grew to encompass the city's public health and building inspections divisions. And in 2019, our shifts grew. The number of on-duty firefighters went from 8 to 9, and then a year later, that number increased to 11. So this is what we look like today. Chief Slama is our fire chief. I'm one of the 2 assistant chiefs. We also have an EMS chief who oversees our ambulance service. Our fire marshal oversees 3 inspectors. There are 2 administrative assistants, and then our 3 shifts each have a captain, a lieutenant, and 9 paramedic firefighters.
I think we wanted to make sure that we addressed how we got to here today. And that's why we thought it was important to discuss the history, the growth, and some of the decisions that were paramount at the time to providing the quality service that we have here in Edina today. And we referenced the EMT paramedics in 1975. That was a very large transition for the city, and the foresight to ensure that we could take care of our residents with city staff to ensure the highest quality of service. What I'm going to talk about is the fire service delivery that we have today. Fire service delivery looks different than it has in years past. The calls have changed. The crew size has increased. The demand on service has continued to rise each and every year. We're going to touch on that today. We're going to talk about the 24/7 emergency response that Edina has. That includes fire response, medical response, technical rescue, inspections, and the training that takes place of this all-hazard team and all-hazard response. One of the important things to note, and what we like to educate on Night to Unite, I had the fortunate position to talk with residents and help understand that not everyone is aware of how the fire service delivery works. So we wanted to talk about our shift and how we staff the city of Edina. The firefighters, and specific to the operations, work 24-hour shifts. They're divided into 3 shifts. We talked about the captain, the lieutenant, and the 9 firefighters. Each shift works approximately 56-hour work weeks. This is when compared to, I think most people are familiar with a 40-hour work week. So our firefighters work 56-hour work weeks and total 2,912 hours a year, as compared to what most people are familiar with, which is our 2,080 hours per year in a 40-hour typical, in quotation mark, work week. Each shift has 11 employees. We touched on the captain, lieutenant, and 9 paramedic firefighters. That is when they're fully staffed. Obviously, we have to have benefit time off to allow our firefighters to enjoy time with their family, concentrate on their health, and ensure that they have benefited time off. What that means for our response is 11-person shifts with a 9-person minimum. No more than 2 firefighters can be off per shift per day without incurring overtime, backfill, whatever that takes to ensure that we have a minimum of 9 people on duty to respond to emergencies in this city. We have an on-call standby officer. The chiefs, the captains work through a standby officer program to ensure that we also have incident command response 24 hours a day with an on-call chief that would be brought in, or an on-call responder, to help supplement and ensure that we have an incident command structure ready to be set up should the situation dictate an increased response. 7 to 9 paramedic firefighters are on duty at Station 1. We say 7 to 9 to talk about that ability for firefighters to have benefit time off. 2 paramedic firefighters are on duty at Station 2. 2 paramedic firefighters are the minimum at Station 2, so always there are 2 staffed paramedic firefighters at Station 2. The shifts work within the daily operations to ensure if firefighters have to travel from one station to the other, to ensure that we have those staffing minimums at all times. Our employees report to work at 7 a.m. They get there early to prepare themselves for shift, prepare their gear on the trucks, make sure that they're in position, ready to respond whenever that tone comes out to the emergency in the city of Edina, or whatever request that might be. They stay on shift till 7 a.m. the next morning. They're away from their family. They create a family atmosphere at the fire station that helps our firefighters stay close together to create a team that helps benefit the response and furthermore the quality of service that you receive as a resident when you call 911. During the workday, they conduct job-related training. Excuse me, there's a heavy demand of EMS, firefighting, and technical rescue that they have to keep skill sets up on. They conduct physical fitness, mental health. They perform routine maintenance and equipment checks and clean the station and equipment. That's something that we're very proud of in the City of Edina, ensuring that our, and by our, I mean your equipment and your fire stations are kept up to the top standard. These activities are paused whenever the emergency comes. We don't know what time that will come. We don't know what that call is. We just know when the tones go off, everyone pauses what they're doing and puts all resources to mitigate the emergency that's in front of them. The fire response of old concentrated on just fires. Today, we protect lives, property, and the environment. Structure fires, mutual aids, smoke calls, smoke alarm, carbon monoxide alarms and detectors, hazardous material response, natural gas responses, electrical emergencies, public assist. The list could go on for days. What I like to explain to people about the fire service is when you don't know who to call, you call the fire department. They come help. They have problem solvers. They have individuals that are here to support and ensure that your life, your property, and the environment is protected and until further resources can get there. They're that all-hazard team of problem solvers and critical thinkers that come to your house willing and ready to help. Medical response. We have an advanced life support ambulance. That's a fancy word for saying that we have skills with our paramedics that help save lives. One of the important things to note in the City of Edina is we have the transporting ambulance service area. That means your firefighter paramedics are responding in your ambulance to your house to provide you with that quality service. Not every city has that. Not every city has that public service answering or public service area. They may have a private ambulance that comes in to provide that service. We have the ability through council and through the residents to ensure that our service is what the residents are expecting. We have mutual aid responses through EMS. With fire and medical response, there are times we have to depend on our neighbors to ensure that we can still provide service. That mutual aid goes both ways. We help them out and they help us out to ensure whenever someone calls 911, we don't have to say we don't have someone to respond. We ensure that we have help coming. Another one of the medical responses is on-scene care without transport. When you send paramedics to a home with the ability to treat a person without taking them to the hospital, and this is limited situations where we can provide that care on scene, we can help determine what that medical preference is going to be and how that patient is going to be transported, or maybe have the ability to provide some advice for this individual to stay home. We do that with on-scene care without transport as well. Technical rescue. Confined space, trench collapse, rope rescue, structural collapse, heavy machinery. These are all instances that require a high grade of technicality and skill by the responders. We train our staff and ensure that they have the skill set to be safe in these instances and help mitigate the emergency. The City of Edina is part of Minnesota Task Force 1, which is a state urban search and rescue team. And we have members on our team that help carry out the training and mission of the Minnesota Task Force 1 with a response from the City of Edina. Our inspections division. Does fire prevention. They perform public education, fire investigation, plan review, and permitted inspections. Fire prevention and education is one of the most important things we can do as firefighters. If we look at the numbers through the years, when the United States as a whole, and certainly the City of Edina, started providing public education and fire prevention fire code enforcement, we see the reduction in fires. We see the reduction in fire loss through education and prevention. That is our goal, is to provide that education and prevention, and we do that through our fire inspections division. But that's not limited to just inspections. When our crews, our firefighters, whether they be in an ambulance or an engine, are out in the community, we encourage our staff to engage with our public, because that is a public education opportunity for us to make wherever we are in the community. I think one of the things that I'm very proud of is all of our contacts that we have with the public, formal and informal. Annual life safety inspections. Annual life safety inspections are the ability for our inspectors to go into commercial properties and restaurants and provide life safety inspections to ensure that all the guests coming to those facilities are safe, that they come to that facility knowing that they are going to be taken care of by the City of Edina. These are numbers from 2020 for total inspections performed by our inspections division. A little over 1,300 in 2020, and year to date, as of today, a little over 1,100. Training. Federal and state mandates require firefighters to meet minimum numbers of hours of training. It's a challenge for us to ensure a safe and effective response, but it is upon all of our fire department to ensure that they have the skills, the tools for survival in these emergencies. The initial Firefighter Academy and annual training, so there's initial training and there's ongoing training, and this does not stop. We have to ensure that all of our firefighters are prepared for the emergencies that they're going to respond to. EMS training requirements are the same way. The initial EMS training requirements are difficult to attain, but past that initial, we don't automatically learn. We have to continue the ongoing training to ensure that the skill set stays to provide quality. One of the most important things, I think, when we talk about training, we talk about equipping firefighters for survival, and we think about a structure fire. In the last few years, that survival doesn't stop with the end of the emergency. We have mental health training, we have physical fitness training, that we have to ensure that we equip our emergency responders to go home and survive as well. That's an important thing to note as we talk about our emergency responders and what they see each and every day, and ensure they have the tools to survive at work, at home, and make sure that they have a safe atmosphere wherever they are. All of that package that we just talked about is explaining the fire station and the fire service delivery. That all fits into our fire stations. Right now we have Station 1, which is at 6250 Tracy Avenue. It was built in 2008 and is roughly 34,000 square feet. It houses our administration division, which is Pete, myself, and the other chief officer staff. Our fire inspection division is housed out of Station 1. We have that emergency response that's 24/7. There's 3 ambulances, 2 engines, 1 tower or ladder truck, and a rescue truck, and 2 support vehicles. That's all housed at Station 1, and I'll have Pete talk a little bit about how that staffing takes place with those units. We have to have creative variables to ensure that we have this response depending on the number of staffing that we have.
So when we staff these vehicles out of these stations, we talk about our minimum staffing of 9, and then our shifts of 11. How we staff that is 2 paramedics per ambulance, and out of Station 1 there are 2 ambulances with 2 paramedics. So that's 4 of our staff, and then our engine has 3 people on it: the captain and the lieutenant and a firefighter. When we're full staffed, we have a 4th ambulance that we can put in service, and that crew of 2 cross staffs the ambulance and our tower truck. So depending on the nature of call is the type of truck they'll go in.
When we get to Station 2, we touched on earlier, this station was built in 1996, originally meant as a substation to be staffed during the day. It's approximately 5,000 square feet. It does have 24/7 response, but with a 2-person ambulance staffing. So there's always 2 individuals there. There's 1 ambulance that's staffed, 1 engine that's not staffed. It's staged at that location and could be utilized if we provided staffing over there, along with an additional support vehicle. One of the areas that I want to mention is 24/7 staffing means that we have the ability to respond out of that station 24/7. That doesn't mean that those 2 firefighters will be in the station 24/7, because when they respond, that station sits empty when they're out on emergency call. Today's Edina Fire Department, the Edina Fire Department will respond to an estimated 6,000 emergency runs in 2021. With the data that we pulled today, we're looking at almost 6,500 runs if we continued on trend today. The 2021 year-to-date runs are 4,872. The graphic that you see shows a heat map of the location of those calls. The red areas being the highest volume of calls. And we split the city into 4 quadrants, with 100 being the north and south split and 62 being the east and west. So we have a northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest quadrant.
If I can just add to that, I talked earlier about when this fire department started and really got up and running, a busy day was 2 runs. When a busy day became 10 runs, we needed to add that second station. And today we're averaging about 18 runs per day.
This is the split of our calls into those quadrants that we talked about. As you can see in this graphic, our southeast zone has 45% of the volume of runs in our community, and currently that is where our Station 2 is, staffed with 2 paramedic firefighters. It's very common to respond to simultaneous emergencies. Year to date, this is our total call volume, with 2,846 overlapping calls. Our paramedic firefighters responding, when we get to the scene is not where that time stops. We have to take care of a patient, treat them, transport them to an appropriate facility, return, and put the ambulance back into service. That creates a lot of opportunities for overlapping calls, where the second, third, fourth call are coming overlapping the previous call, causing challenges in emergency response. This is numbers through the years from 2016 to the year-to-date information in 2021. I'd like to point out that 2020 is a year we probably all might remember, and that data looks a little bit different, and I think that speaks to the City of Edina changing the way that they did things in 2020. We traveled less, we stayed at home, unattended cooking was less, so our call volume actually reduced in 2020. You can see in 2021, year-to-date information, we are already getting close to the 2020 numbers. And that trend from 2016 on increased total call volume. The gray line in this graph is indicating the percentage of EMS calls. It's a little bit hard to read just based on the percentages for that gray line are on the right side of that graph. But virtually 75 to 80% of our calls or run volume are EMS in nature. This is a graphic of our emergency response. So we call ourselves the fire department. That's that all-hazard team that I mentioned. The rescue and emergency medical calls captures motor vehicle crashes, etc. in this type of incident, and that 77.9% is our current percentage breakdown of that 300 type, which is a NMFERS code for rescue and EMS. Tomorrow's fire department, our city continues to grow, more dense, more diverse. Emergency run volumes are not trending down. They are the opposite and increasing. Our residents and visitors will continue to expect that timely service, as they should. The professional response to their calls for help is important and needed, and our fire department will continue to grow to certainly achieve that response. In 2018, the city commissioned a study for a station location study where we answered these questions. Can we serve the public in a timely manner? Are facilities adequate, or do they need to be replaced? And how can we best serve the public in the future? The data in these next slides comes right out from that 2018 study, which shows heat mapping for the EMS and fire responses in our community. We can see a heavy draw in our southeast quadrant. This is again a heat map for calls, indicating every call that took place in the period of 2015 to 2018 with similar heat maps. This is where our responses are multiple for the darker colors in each of these areas, EMS and fire. The average response times during this study continued to increase through the years. Our time on calls continued to increase through the years, and we want to make sure that we set this goal to achieve in the future and that we are not responding to an emergency of our own where our call and response time does not meet the needs of our city. The 2 station is our current situation. This infographic is a little difficult to read. It's showing the response times from our stations to the different parts of our community in minutes. They propose the 3 station model, which reduces the response time and better serves the entire community throughout. The Station 1, the future fire stations that were proposed, Station 1, no change. Station 2, being put in the southeast quadrant, and Station 3 near City Hall to better serve the northeast quadrant. The recommendations, as previously mentioned, were Station 1 being kept in its current location, construct a new Station 2, and plan for continued growth in the northeast quadrant, acquire property and construct Station 3 in the next 5 to 10 years. Our next steps for the city are to identify the location for the Station 2 site, finance and construct Station 2, evaluate the response models with the new Station 2. Once we pound that stake in the ground of where Station 2 is, we can then determine and identify the location for Station 3 based on that construction site. We can evaluate those response models to ensure that even response throughout the community. That is the conclusion of our presentation tonight. I have Scott coming back up here, but we're excited to engage in some questions from the public, both here in person and online through telecall.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Pete. Andrew will now stand for questions after he has a chance to get a little glass of water. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Communications Director Jennifer Benarott or Dan Riesig will have a mic and we'll bring it to you. We'd like to have you speak into the mic so that we can preserve this for the video. If you're watching from home, you can call 1-800-374-0221 with conference ID 5675597. Press *1 on your telephone keypad when you're ready to ask a question. An operator will mute your line and place you into a queue until it is your turn to speak. When it is your turn, Communications Director Jennifer Benarott will introduce you. We will take questions from the room first and from our call-in folks second. So is there anyone who would like to begin? Mr. Brown, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi there. I don't know if you need my name and address, but how do we as residents help supercharge this rollout of Station 2 and 3 so that this really gets done? As somebody who has just recently used Edina Fire Paramedic service, it's really invaluable. I mean, how do we help get this done? Really is what it comes down to. So, thanks.
Mr. Brown, thank you for that question, and I just want to say thank you for the information you provided earlier about the contact with our fire department and the service you received just yesterday, which it was unfortunate. I would tell you that engaging with your elected officials is one of the ways that you can help support and get your voice heard. I think that it's important to have every resident contact their elected official with their information. That's how we're going to be heard. We have the information. We're moving forward. We're actively trying to move forward with the study and acquiring sites. And sometimes those challenges tend to take some time. And I can assure you that staff is really working to try to get this and ensure that our system doesn't fail. That is our goal, that we are providing this quality service long into the future and setting ourselves up to be successful and not have failures in our organization or system.
The only thing I would add to what the chief said, Andy, is that I don't know that supercharging it would be the right approach. I know what you mean by that. How can we make it a higher priority than it is? I think one of the approaches that we're trying to take with this is a major decision, right? This is a $20 million decision. And if you've got a decision of that magnitude, it's important to be thoughtful, careful, methodical about how you make it. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. But it is something I can tell you that we are talking about or doing something with every single workday in some form or fashion. We'd welcome your questions. It's not mandatory to have one if you don't.
I've got one. Okay. So we're hearing a lot lately about the increase that our police are responding to more calls that are mental health related. I'm wondering if the fire department has noticed that as well, and if so, how that has changed or impacted your response and what you're doing to gear up for that.
Thank you, Mr. Good. I think that mental health challenges our entire system, police, fire, the emergency facilities, receiving hospitals, and that challenge will continue. One of the trends that we're tracking is time on calls, especially as of late with information that we're receiving, training that we're receiving. We have to make sure that we are evaluating patients appropriately, responding appropriately, and that just like building the station, takes a long time. It is not a quick emergency call. And rightfully so, it ties up resources so that we can ensure that we are delivering that quality care to that individual that's having a mental health crisis at that time. So certainly that demand on services increases across our service along with police. We're working an initiative with our police department, especially with the recent information with mental health and how we're going to respond to mental health crises in the future, that is ever evolving. We want to ensure that we are there to support our police department, support our fire department, and ensure that our response is quality and beneficial to the Edina residents.
I do have a few people on the call. At this point, no one is indicating a desire to speak. As a reminder, if you would like to speak, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1. For those of you at home who are listening and may still want to call in, please call 1-800-374-0221. Once you've connected to an operator, please give the conference ID. Tonight, that's 567-5597. You'll be asked to give your name and address, and then once you are in the room, please press *1 if you would like to speak. With that, I still don't have anyone who is indicating a desire to speak from home. I would recommend that we wait a minute or so before moving on, as there is a slight delay in the broadcast.
As I mentioned earlier, our commitment for our Town Talk series is that we end at 8 p.m. We will end earlier than 8 p.m. if we run out of questions. Councilmember Jackson.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. With the training facility, are we able to use our training facility here in town, or where do you go for that?
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. I think that we do definitely use a training facility in town. I can have Pete speak a little bit about the training facility too. He's closely tied to that as our training chief prior to this position, so he's very familiar with our training facility and the operations. One thing that we have to remember is we share that facility. So even though it's in our city, it doesn't mean it's available all the time. Our crews find ways and opportunities to train throughout. That formal training can take place at the fire station. One of the designs that we really want to incorporate into our fire stations is a capability for shift training to take place on site. The training facility in our city is fantastic. It provides us a great training opportunity, but it does put us out of position from the southeast quadrant where our highest run volume is. trying to provide training on shift can become challenging. When we create a training lesson plan and multiple emergencies are taking place with on average of 18 a day, it's pulling staff away to respond. They may not come back to that training, depending on if they go, if we're stacking up calls with those overlapping calls, they may not have an opportunity to come back. So Pete, if you want to talk a little bit about the training facility and just how that operates with our shifts and training, I think that might be beneficial as well.
Yeah, thank you. So the South Metro Public Safety Training Facility is a joint venture between the cities of Edina, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and the Metropolitan Airports Commission. So it's both a police and fire training facility. It's got a fire training tower for the fire department. It's got a gun range for the police department. There's classroom space, and there's other practical training portions of that. Like the chief said, there's a big demand for time and space there. So we get down there pretty regularly. Our fire crews go down there. We can do live fire training through the built-in propane burners. There's space to do technical rescue training there. But again, it's all kind of dependent on when we have time during the day and when the space is available down there. We do try to do training in the yards at the fire station. We'll pull the trucks around back and do work that we can, which keeps us, closer to, centralized response areas. But yeah, that's a great training facility. We love going down there. Yeah.
Any other questions in the room tonight? And we don't have anyone joining us online. So I think we're going to wrap it up. As a reminder, you can continue to ask questions and make comments about the city's fire operations online at bettertogether.org for the next week. The online conversation closes on Tuesday, October 5th. Our next Town Talk will be 7 p.m. Monday, November 1st. Engineering Director Chad Milner and resident Ann Swenson will talk about the city's new way of funding local street reconstruction projects. You can watch online or at Edina TV or come in person to Edina City Hall. Thank you for joining us tonight and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.